my apologies to the entire community of our thousands of listeners right now who have experienced that technical difficulty. Looks like we just had a complete cutout. You never know what's going to happen here on Kennesaw campus. Some people think it's haunted, so I do apologize. But now we can just go back and talk about Atlanta United again with Henry, and I'm going to go ahead and switch it over to them.
Yeah, so basically a few poor performances from a couple of players. Santi Sosa, he started off the season really well. He was solid. I mean, the joke was that he was the midfield, which he kind of was. He held it down. He was putting in good passes. And then against Philadelphia, and really recently, you've seen this pattern of his pass accuracy just dropping, his decision-making being a little poor. Sometimes, you notice that, and he loses the ball, and then the opposition has a big chance there because, I mean, you don't want to lose the ball in your half. That's pretty bad. And another thing is George Bello. I've said this before. George Bello is really strong on attack, but when it comes to defending, he's kind of so-so. Well, this weekend, I don't know. I think his decision making was kind of on the same level as Sosa's. He tried to just get through some spaces where he just could not fit, and he could not get through. And having the option to pass it, you're just watching the game. You're like, pass it, come on, pass it, and he doesn't. He tries to do the play all by himself, loses the ball, and you're like, gosh darn it. Well, and one of the big theories on this, I read this on an MLS post basically, is that when Marcelino Moreno had that huge run where he took out like 5 defenders against DC United and then passed it in for George Bello to score, the theory or joke was basically that like Atlanta United players saw that and were like, I can do that too, and so basically tried to do that against Philadelphia and Montreal last night, and that didn't work out too well. Philadelphia has a much more solid defense than DC, and that was obvious when players like Luis Araujo, he tried to dribble past a few times, didn't get through. Marcelino Moreno tried it, Barco tried it. I mean, everyone tried to just dribble and make their own individual play, and it just was not working out. And having better passing options, they just decided to opt for that one play. We saw this from Barco ever since, before his Olympic epiphany, I guess, because he came back from the Olympics and started just on fire. But beforehand, that was also one of the big complaints about him, is that he would just think he's like Messi or something, think he's, he's able to like dribble through the entire defense, and he goes up, dribbles past one person, loses the ball, and then you're frustrated because you're like, you have a better option, you have a better passing option. Just don't try to do this so much, because they're gonna start. The defense knows what your game plan is basically when you're trying that so many times. So that happened against Philadelphia last night. You could see a little bit more of the same. Not a super exciting game. The big highlight, though, obviously, was Joseph Martinez with the penalty he scored, grabbed his 100th goal for Atlanta United in all competitions. That is the fastest an MLS player has ever gotten 100 goals for their team. So it's a big record, a big achievement. Congratulations to him. Big star in the city. Everybody's saying, build the statue, because he's awesome. And that's a huge achievement for him. So good job. And looking forward, we've got a few players getting called up to the U.S. men's national team who will be playing next week against several teams. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But George Bello, Miles Robinson, they're in the list that head coach Greg Berhalter has called up to compete in the World Cup qualifiers. Normally, this would mean they'd miss a few matches because MLS decides not to suspend or like take a little pause in the season so that their the the FIFA matches can be played. But Atlanta United doesn't play until the 16th, and by that time, all the World Cup qualifiers are done for October. So they won't miss anything unless maybe Pineda decides to sit them out, let them rest a little bit, because the last game is the 13th. So it's a bit of a short period of time before that next game. So he might have him sit out, he might not. It just all depends on Pineda. And speaking of our next match will be Saturday, October 2nd, against Montreal at 7 p.m. And it's a big one. The Atlanta United is currently in 6th in the Eastern Conference. The magic number is 7th, right? You want to be above 7th in order to be in the playoffs. And right now, they are tied in points with New York City, who is 4th, Philadelphia 5th, and Orlando, who is 7th. And they are 2 points ahead of Montreal, who they're going to be facing on Saturday, and 1 point behind DC, which is in 3rd. So now you see exactly how tight that conference is, because a few results, and Atlanta could end up anywhere from 3rd to 8th on Saturday, depending on the results of all the matches. So obviously a win is important, and some of the other results, I mean, if they pan out, Atlanta could find themselves in a better position. And the game after Montreal, they're facing Toronto on the road, and then they come back for a stretch of 3 home games, which obviously Atlanta performs really well at home, so that's something to look forward to. And a little bit more news in MLS. Chicago Fire fired their head coach, Raphael Wicki. The Fire is not doing too hot. Chicago is 12th in the Eastern Conference. They have Wicki had a record of 12, 25, 14 in MLS. He came in before the 2020 season, and he just didn't work out. They did win 2-0 last night against New York City, which helped Atlanta United a little bit, but still poor performance. He was sacked, and assistant coach Frank Klopas will take over. He previously served as head coach for the Fire between 2011 and 2013. However, the club has announced that he will not be the permanent coach, so they will look for a coach to replace him. That makes the 7th MLS coach change this year among those Atlanta United, who sacked Gabriel Heinze, brought on Gonzalo Pineda. There was also RSL, Toronto, a slew of other MLS teams that had coaching changes. So that's interesting. And big news, Columbus Crew last night defeated Cruz Azul to win the Campeones Cup, which is the annual competition between the champion of Liga MX and the champion of MLS. So congratulations, Columbus Crew. That is big. They won 2-0. Zelarayan free kick goal bounced off of Brian Angulo. Own tournament win will it might give him a little bit of a boost. Who knows? And also New England Revolution inching ever closer to the to smashing the 72-point record set by LAFC. They are at, I believe, 65. So and they have a few matches left. At the rate they're going, they're very likely to get it. So that'll be great for them. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about the U.S. men's national team, who unfortunately will not be playing with Christian Pulisic or Gio Reyna. They're out on injury. It's sad. But good news, Weston McKennie is back. Yes, Greg Berhalter has him in the list. So, and we still have some good forward options. I mean, we can still get through. So here are the matches, the World Cup qualifiers for the next couple of weeks. Starting on October 7th, USA will face Jamaica at 7:30, and then Mexico versus Canada. That is going to be a big match, an exciting match at 9:30 right after that. Then Sunday, October 10th, we have Panama against the U.S. again at 6, Jamaica versus Canada at 6, and Mexico versus Honduras at 7. And then to close out the World Cup qualifiers for October, Thursday, October 13th, U.S. versus Costa Rica at 7, Canada versus Panama at 7:30, and El Salvador versus Mexico at 10:05. Keep in mind, those standings in CONCACAF are very close. The top 3 teams will pass directly to the World Cup, and then the 4th place will play a wild card slot against teams from other continents. It's exciting. The World Cup is coming up in just about a little over a year, so it's an exciting time. And that's it for CONCACAF, MLS, Continental Soccer. Yeah.
Alrighty, well, we will be moving back to talk about international soccer in just a little bit, but I did want to toss it over to Devon for a little bit of NFL news because we had the first win of the season for the Falcons. But in general, just another really interesting week in the NFL, and the standings are, I don't think anybody would have predicted at the beginning of the season. I know it's only 3 weeks, but let me go ahead and send it over to Devon. What are your thoughts over this last weekend of games?
Dude, what is there like not to think about? Like, I'm going to be honest, like, there is so much happening in the NFL that it is head-scratching, mind-boggling. I'm so lost at what is going on with this team's not doing well. This team is somehow doing well. I mean, like, good thing I don't bet on sports because I bet you I'd be out of a lot of dough.
A lot of people are.
Like,
People are right now.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, you look at it, it's like, hey, give props to where they're due. Okay, these teams are undefeated, right? We got the Broncos, Panthers, Cardinals, Raiders, Rams. Great teams. You know what? I mean, like, hey, I'm a Seahawks fan. We don't talk about that right now, but give credit where it's due. Cardinals and Rams, they're really coming up. They're showing out. We see that Stafford. We see that Sean McVay connection, and you're just like, chef's kiss. That's a beautiful team. That is a team they put money into. They put effort into. They came out, and they're like, dude, we got Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey, Cooper Kupp, Matthew Stafford. You can't have this many big names.
Yeah.
Dude, it's insane. But I got to say it. Can we really call Broncos contenders? Yeah, they're 3-0, but let's look at who the Broncos have faced so far. I mean, you just look at some of the teams. What the Jets, they faced the Giants and the Jags.
It does remain to be seen. It does. They're the one with the biggest questions of all the undefeated teams. It's only 3 games, and they do have some really solid players on the team for sure. But you're right. The most questions of all the, of all of those undefeated teams, they're the most questionable for sure.
I mean, you got to look at these guys, and you got to be like, all 3 of their wins came from winless teams. We got the Giants, Jets, and Jags right here in my notes for no wins, along with those being the Colts and Lions. Are there any shockers to you guys that you got to look at and you'd be like, wow, they're undefeated. Wow, they have no wins? Like, because, I mean, I look at the Colts and we look at this off-season hype, and you got to be like, wow, really, no wins. No, not one. You couldn't do one once.
Yeah, I agree with the Colts, especially because of how their running game was supposed to be. I mean, it's one thing to talk about Carson Wentz and whether or not he was really going to, step it up to the next level after all of his injuries with the Eagles and kind of the weird ending of his career with the Eagles. That was a little not smooth, to say the least.
Right.
But I agree. Like, he's still a talented guy. He's still someone who could be a starter somewhere, or at least a strong backup quarterback. And for that team to be 0-3, they didn't play terribly against the Titans over the weekend. They did blow a couple of turnover opportunities. In fact, I believe the Titans had 2 or 3 turnovers on the Colts side of the field, where the Titans were going to score or get some sort of a score, and then the Colts took the ball but didn't take advantage of that. Mm-hmm. So are they maybe the best of the winless teams? It's hard to say.
Right.
I mean, it's hard to really qualify that statement, but certainly they're the least expected. I don't think anybody would have had them as a winless team so far. So that remains to be seen what they can do.
Yeah, I mean, give them the credit. I'm gonna give it to them. They're winless, and we'll see how things go as the season goes on. It has been a crazy season, so you never know what's gonna happen later. We can only sit here and watch the Chargers as they beat the Chiefs 30-24. Chiefs are now 1-2. Thoughts? Thoughts about these Chiefs?
Surprise.
Yeah, right. You can't.
I was not expecting.
You can't
that.
even help but get wide-eyed there and just like wonder, head scratch, like Patrick Mahomes, like what's going on.
Yeah, that's an interesting combination of things because the Chiefs, they may not be winless, but for them to be 1-2 is not. Again, 3 games, they have plenty of time to turn it around. They've scored a lot of points in those games. To be fair, they've scored they've scored 92 points in 3 games, so that's averaging more than 30 points a game. So the offense is clearing out the problem. Their defense has given up 95. So that's the big concern for the Chiefs right now is where does that defense go? Because that was actually one of the reasons they were able to win the Super Bowl was not just because of Mahomes, but also because of a strong defensive line and secondary as well. So clearly that hasn't really necessarily been a focus of them yet, but hopefully their coaches will see just the numbers and say, hey, wait a second, let's get some other people involved here and try to find a group that will keep the other offenses at bay.
Right. Well, let me ask you a question here, Rio. I say Diggs. Who do you think of?
Think of the wide receiver.
Stephon Diggs?
Yes.
Well, that's not who's in the news today.
That's
We're talking
right.
about Trevon Diggs, who has an interception every game of the season. How crazy is that? You can only help but look, wow, this duo, hey, they got one brother who's good on offense, and they got one brother who seems to be killing it on defense. What are we thinking there? When
all
you
3
see
games?
all
three, yeah.
all three. It's kind of
solid.
crazy. I mean, you can't help but look back and be like, whoa.
Okay, wow.
What are you guys eating? I gotta know. Tell me.
That game was something to behold. I think I learned more about the Eagles than I did the Cowboys that game, even though the Cowboys won pretty handily. I think that defense that the Cowboys have is quite formidable, but also the mistakes by the Eagles were shocking, considering it was a team that had beaten the Falcons very handily. And I know Falcons may not be that great of a team this year, but to go from beating a team, I think 32-6 to then getting destroyed 41-21, there's something that's not quite adding up. And I was just on all sides, the decision making was just not there for the Eagles. But yes, Trevon Diggs, that defense for the Cowboys, that was very impressive. I think that was something of a proving game for the Cowboys. I think they kind of needed that. They've been a team that's been under question for the last few years. What's their identity? There was a time 5, 6, 7 years ago they were starting to look like they were turning the corner with Romo, and it never really quite panned out. But in Prescott, they looked strong in his first couple seasons, and it just hasn't really quite gotten there. But they're now leading that division that is not, has been associated with some pretty bizarre seasons, some of which have not been very good. I believe a couple of years ago, all teams were like 8-8 or 9-7, right in there. I think that was pretty recently.
That was last year.
Was that just last year? Yeah, I knew it was pretty recently, and that happens in time to time in certain divisions, and you just know, wow, that's when the teams all have that 500 records. It's not fun to watch, but the Cowboys, if they can break out of that, then they can be the clear leader because of all the teams, they have the most consistency. Although, actually, I don't think Washington's all that bad. I think nobody was giving them much of a look earlier in the year, but actually they're not too bad.
Yeah, I mean, like, you just got to look at it. I think what's really upsetting to a lot of people was what happened to that defense. I mean, you just got to look at it and be like, what, that defense was so special about you guys. Where'd it go?
Yep.
And I think that's kind of setting off a lot of people right now.
Well, a big one, that Packers 49ers, Aaron Rodgers is not dead yet, as they say. He is still alive and, in fact, trying to put himself on that thriving level, not just surviving in the NFL, because the last couple of seasons have been brilliant, and also there are some signs of his age, but I think this is one of those classic Aaron Rodgers games where he just shows that grit and rallied them back to that big victory, 30-28 over the 49ers. That's huge. I mean, the Packers really, really needed that. They had that bad first week, but they've gotten 2 good wins in a row, and they're up there in that division now. So they got to take advantage because those other teams have been underperforming. I think the Vikings got their first win, but I think the Bears have been a team that's been disappointing because they had high expectations with Montgomery and all those players that they had. But Packers need to take advantage of it because they're on the wrong side when it comes to points scored and points given up. They're still 68-83, so they need to find that consistency, or else if the Bears somehow get it together on the offensive side, because the Bears defense is pretty decent, but if the Bears can get it together offensively, they can come back in that division and take over, I think.
For sure. And talk about surviving in the NFL. We see these Steelers kind of start to fall down. We have to wonder, is Big Ben still their guy?
On one hand, it was almost humorous to watch some of the slip and falls, but it's also kind of not, because it is a guy who's been in the NFL for a long time, and it did make the low light reels, I guess you could call it, where he got out of the pocket and started slipping, and it wasn't not just one time. But as a whole, I think you're spot on about Pittsburgh, just a team that should not be losing. Like, they have more talent to be bottom of the AFC North.
It's insane, yeah.
I don't know exactly what it is. I'm not an expert on the Steelers, but they went from a team that were 2-3 years ago considered Super Bowl contenders, and now all of a sudden the Browns are better than them. The Ravens are better, even though the Ravens have been a little bit underperforming this year. And now, scariest of all for the Steelers, the Bengals, the prospect of Cincinnati being a team that has broken out of their mediocrity and now have a future franchise quarterback. If the Steelers don't get it together, they're going to be on that bottom for the rest of the season.
No, and it's definitely scary. It's definitely something you got to look at and you got to reorganize. It's like, as someone who looks to have one of the best defenses in the NFL, how can you be giving up these points, and how can you be on the bottom of the league? And when you have these receivers that aren't no-name receivers, all right, I'm not going to sit here and say they're top 10, but they're not no-name for sure. There are no excuses to be this low in the NFL. This may be Mike Tomlin's first year with a losing record.
That would be a shock because he's been so consistent for them. Although they have underperformed in the playoffs, but in recent years anyway. But again, this is a team that a couple of years ago was looking like a contender for the Super Bowl, and now things are not really going their way. But back to the Atlanta story, the Falcons finally won a game, albeit against the Giants, but a good win for the Falcons to get themselves on the right side of on the win column there, and not falling to 0-3, which is huge in every conceivable way. But any thoughts on the Falcons?
I will say this: a win is a win. No matter how we get it, a win is a win, whether it be against the Giants or somebody else. I'm glad we got it before it was becoming too apparent. But I think that defense really took a step up, and I think everybody started really looking at them and started questioning, and they said, "Well, we're not out of this yet. Our defense still has something to give."
The defense does. Now,
yes.
The offense,
that's in question.
This is, the second lowest points total in the NFC, just behind the Bears, which in itself is surprising because the Bears have David Montgomery, but clearly the quarterback, Justin Fields, hasn't necessarily worked out right now, and that was an area that has been constantly evolving or devolving, maybe more accurately, since Jay Cutler left. But right now, the Falcons' offense really needs something. I'm not really sure what it is other than just scoring points, because they need to find a way to score points every single game. But they have averaged well under 20 points a game in their first three. In fact, they only have 48 in 3 games. Now, I'm not a math major, but that's not very good. So certainly the Falcons need to work on that. Speaking of Atlanta, the MLB standings are about as tight as they have ever been this season. We have insanity in the American League, and I'll get to that in a minute, but in the National League, it's a little bit more clear what's going to happen. and the Braves are at the magic number of 1. Yes, just 1 win away from winning the division for a 4th year running for the Braves. But the big question, as usual for the Braves, how far can they advance in the playoffs? That has always been the question of the Braves, and can they do it in a year that has been especially difficult due to injuries and a little bit of early underperforming? But suffice to say, they're at the top of the division. They don't have the prettiest record in the National League, but they are ahead of the Phillies, the Mets, and of course, Miami and Washington as well. But I think the Mets will be the team coming out of the season the most disappointed that they couldn't fight for the division, considering all the trades that they made with Baez and Lindor and all that stuff. I think the Mets will feel the most disappointed. The Phillies probably as well, although they played all right toward the end of the season. But for neither of those teams to catch up to a Braves team that had faced so much injury and other kind of odd issues throughout the season, I think Atlanta should be proud that they were able to stave off two teams that were very aggressive in the trade market in the previous 2 summers, and still were not able to catch up to the Braves in the division. So again, tonight, big game versus the Phillies. Braves-Phillies tonight, essentially to decide the National League East. Who will be the division winner? There are only 5 more games in the season for either team. Well, for Atlanta, they've played 157 right now, so they'll be playing 158 tonight and 4 more after that. So it'll be huge. If Atlanta wins, they win the division, and they're good. In the Central, St. Louis. So the Cardinals had been on, yes, a 17-game winning streak to get themselves from right about 500 to 87 and 70 and clear second wild card team in the National League. Before that, it had been very tight between them and Cincinnati as well as San Diego, but San Diego's fallen back. Cincinnati stayed pretty even to where they were about a month ago, but not winning quite enough against the St. Louis team that found themselves on a hot streak. And with that being said, St. Louis has clinched a wild card spot. However, the intrigue in the National League remains. The rivalry between the Giants and the Dodgers, which goes back, of course, many, many years in New York as well. But the Giants and the Dodgers may actually, for the first time, face each other in the playoffs, which is an interesting bit of a tidbit that I learned yesterday from MLB.com, where, yes, these teams have had a lot of drama in the regular season. They've had a rivalry that stretches back to when it was the New York Giants and the Brooklyn Dodgers. But for one reason or another, neither have played each other in the playoffs, and it looks like this may be that year that it happens, depending on how things shake out. But both teams have over 100 wins, yet one of these two teams theoretically could actually miss the full playoffs. Now, one of them will reach the wild card, but certainly I think it will be disappointing if one of these teams loses in the playoffs or in the wild card game against the Cardinals, simply because they both have over 100 wins. Right now, the Giants are on a 5-game winning streak. The Dodgers are on a 3-game winning streak, and they don't play each other, unlike Atlanta and Philadelphia. But it will be really interesting to watch. And if whichever one gets into the wild card, if they win, they would play the other in the divisional series, because either way, the winner of the division will have far and away the best record in the National League with over 100 wins. So that, I think, is one of the most intriguing storylines of this season, specifically with the way the Giants have played. They've had a lot of veterans step up this year and have breakout seasons, even though the team itself was unexpected to be in first or even second place in the West, the National League West division this season. And the team that disappointed was San Diego. It was a team with Tatis and a very deep roster, albeit, to be fair, a lot of injuries that they have faced, a team that was expected to do a lot. So, and then I'll briefly touch on the American League right now, which has a very, very tight wild card standing. Right now, the Yankees and the Red Sox, the big rivals, are the top 2 wild card teams in the American League, but only 1 game separates them. And not only that, there are 2 teams knocking on the door. Again, with only 4 games remaining in the season, Seattle is just a half game behind the second wild card spot, and they have been a very pleasantly surprising team this year. They were not expected to be playoff contenders, but they have done a lot of gradual building over the season, have gotten themselves 89 wins, and I think a platform for the future. I think this is a team that will be in contention for the division next year. Toronto has had a very impressive season as well and are just 1 game behind that second wild card spot. And that's a team that's done a lot of trades. Seattle's done their own sort of building through their farm system and a few trades, but Toronto's done a lot of aggressive trading, this season and earlier. So Toronto, either if one of those two teams could get into the wild card, it would be very intriguing. Although, of course, a Yankees-Red Sox wild card would be pretty crazy. I think everybody can agree that would be a very exciting wild card matchup. And now I think we can talk about probably the most bizarre, controversial, etc., however you want to call it, sporting result from the past week, which was in the Champions League soccer in Europe. Now, there were a lot of exciting results there in the Champions League, as well as the Europa League, which is playing today. A lot of good stuff. But the most controversial, bizarre result that occurred there was the loss of Real Madrid, the perennial powerhouse, European champions many times over, losing to a team in the unrecognized state of Transnistria on the eastern border of Moldova.
The what?
The unrecognized state of Transnistria. This team is Sheriff Tiraspol, and they, owned by people with lots of money that I'll never have, they defeated Real Madrid this past week in a fashion that makes many statements. Sheriff Tiraspol is a team that is made up of nobody from Moldova or Transnistria, including the head coach, who's Ukrainian. And I don't think the Ukrainians would want to be considered Moldovans either. So, but the team is made up of people who combined have, I think, less than 30 international caps with their respective countries, including their striker, who's from Luxembourg and who's the first person from Luxembourg to score in the Champions League, but isn't even the star player from Luxembourg. He has like 16 caps. So this has so many storylines, and I like to get the thoughts of our man Henry here to see what he thinks.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bizarre game, a bizarre result. No one saw this coming, really. Real Madrid, often considered one of the best teams in the world, if not the best team in the world. Just, I can't believe it. It's crazy, and when you look at the stats, it's even more unbelievable. Sheriff only had 24% of possession throughout the entire game. 24%. That, I mean, it's okay. Here's the thing about possession. It doesn't. Okay, and I say this as someone who's watched Atlanta United for the 2020 season and the beginning of this season. Possession isn't necessarily what matters. It's what you do with it, and Sheriff showed us that in the most spectacular fashion, because they only got 24% of possession, yet managed to outscore Real Madrid. 2-1 minimum difference, but still a win is a win. Even if it's from by 1 goal or by 10, it doesn't matter. True, a win is a win, and it's just mind-boggling. I mean, they had 1/5 of the shots that Real Madrid had. Real Madrid had like 31 shots. They had 4 shots, and 2 of them went in. And Real Madrid's goal was a penalty kick too. So it's like they just found a way to break the clean sheet, but not really much else. They are so the table for Group D right now looks a little like this. Sheriff is first in Group D, which is just
What does that mean?
That broke me. Okay, so for those of you who are not super familiar with soccer tournaments, Champions League is played in what's called the group stage. So basically, there are groups lettered A through, what is it, like D, G, something like that, D. And basically, each group consists of 4 teams.
Okay.
And each team in that group plays each other.
Okay.
And then whoever has the most amount of points, the top 2, move on to the bracket, and then the other 2 are eliminated. Unless, are they doing wild cards for this one? I don't believe they're
doing that.
So it's just the top 2. So right now, Sheriff is first with 6 points because they've won 2 games, and Real Madrid is second with 3 because they've won 1, lost 1. So I don't think Sheriff has been in this position ever.
No, they have been in the Europa League. They have played against Tottenham Hotspur about 8 or 9 years ago, but they have never been in the Champions League, much less leading a group after 2 matches, in which they beat Shakhtar Donetsk, and they got to face Inter Milan pretty soon. But this is certainly a very bizarre story. Let me just give you a short, not a huge in-depth description, but a very brief description of what the group that owns this soccer team is called Sheriff. Now, they are not police officers. That is just the name of a company. It is a corporate entity that owns a chain of, and I quote, petrol stations, supermarkets, a TV channel, a publishing house, a construction company, a Mercedes-Benz dealer, an advertising agency, a spirits factory, 2 bread factories, a mobile phone network, and the football club Sheriff Tiraspol, and the stadium that cost about $200 million.
Sick.
Oh, and not to forget, a 5-star hotel still under construction.
So pretty much
this,
just like
almost there. They're getting there.
So
okay.
Are they just like trying to like make a business gumbo or something where they just mix a bunch of
I mean, when
different
you
things?
have money, the
Sounds
money will
sick.
talk.
That's
I like
crazy,
You can do
dude.
whatever you want
visit.
with the money.
That is
I will be staying
amazing.
at the 5-star hotel.
So, yes, this is a fascinating story that I'm sure hopefully someone will make an exciting documentary on one day.
Needless to say, the players are never going to forget the day they beat
Not
Real
at all.
Madrid.
That if nothing
I
else,
won't.
the players
I won't let
deserve
them
to
forget.
get
Yeah.
applauded and lauded for their work, because whatever the ownership of the team is, and let's just say that this team has apparently won like 20 of the last 21 Moldovan league championships, which tells you that they are the league. And this happens in certain European leagues, not just in soccer, but in other sports like basketball, where you have these big corporations that own the teams and they have the money, and then the team wins 10, 15, 20 league titles in a row. So, but it's just a fascinating story. But yeah, there's no doubt that the players on that level, because they are from all over the world, they deserve this moment to be able to live in this moment, beating Madrid. Like, this is the giant killing of all giant killings. I mean, this is, bigger than something happening in the FA Cup in England, or this is big. So yes, congratulations to my good friends in the unrecognized breakaway strait in Transnistria. So yes, that was a very exciting story. Well, looks like we might have to wrap up our time pretty soon. But before I do that, I'd like to thank Devon and Henry for joining me. And
of course, it's always a pleasure.
If either of you have any additional topics you want to briefly cover, I'll open the floor to you guys.
I'll just cover some quick news in the NFL. Record field goal: Justin Tucker kicked 66 yards. Sherman signed with the Bucks. Crazy. LaShawn McCoy signed a 1-day deal with the Eagles, then to retire. Adam Humphries, 109-yard kick 6 off Adam, or not? Oh, I said Adam. That's embarrassing. Matt Prater. James White is out for the season, and we already covered this, but Trevon Diggs intercepted a ball every game. Yep. Poor Matt Prater lost his record and had to kick 6.
That is a tough day, but that's right. Justin Tucker, the kicker of the Ravens, of course, not only kicked a 66-yard record-breaking field goal, which I'm going to try to recreate on Madden sometime.
99 all the way up.
Yeah, but yeah. it bounced on that bottom goalpost, which is the funny thing is that normally if you hit the goalpost, it'll it won't go
Yeah.
in, but the I don't know the physics of this, but the ball hit that bottom goalpost and then went in and hit that back netting, and that's incredible. I mean,
my friend is a field goal.
I mean, even as a Lions fan of that game, it was in Detroit, man, that would have been exciting to watch that. So congratulations,
would've been
Justin.
something
It
else.
had to be him. I mean,
Of course.
yeah,
I mean, with a
multiple
career like
Pro
his,
Bowl guy who's been the most consistent kicker in the last decade, it makes sense. So
Yeah.
Henry, anything else you got?
Yeah, big thing. PSG defeated Man City.
Oh,
let's
that's right.
go.
Messi.
Yeah. So I may or may not have spent like last episode kind of talking about how Messi isn't fitting in with PSG. Well, he proved me wrong.
I say we talk bad about him again so he can kick another goal.
Yeah, maybe that works. for
Messi,
him.
you're not good.
Yeah. So he scored his first goal. Sorry, his first goal for PSG in a 2-0 win over Man City. Very, very close game. Man City very close to scoring on several occasions. A little decision I didn't understand was why Guardiola took so much time to put Gabriel Jesus in. I mean, he scored the goal for Man City in their win over Chelsea over the weekend, and I'm just surprised because he's the star striker of that team, and you could see like in the game they were missing a lot. Like they were missing a little bit more presence in the attacking third. They were missing a little bit more of a central striker to really just send the ball home. They had several chances, and ultimately, if you don't score goals, they get scored on you, and PSG pulls in the win. Messi with his first goal. More to come, hopefully. Yeah, a little bit more. No matches for Champions League next week because of the FIFA international break. Yeah, that's what I've got so far.
Sick.
All right. Well, that sounds great. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Looks like we got up to 5 viewers today.
Hey, let's go.
/ listeners. So that's a nice improvement over our paltry 2 from before. So again, thank you for everybody for listening / watching. Thank you to Devon and Henry, and we
Of course,
will be
it's always
back,
a pleasure.
next week. Thank you so much.
See ya.